So welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, welcome. So I come across this story, and this is one I really wanted to cover. I've only seen like the first maybe 10 or 15 seconds of this video, so we're pretty much going to be doing this blind. But in the beginning of this segment, this news segment, they mention a name that I have covered before, and that is AJ Friend. And that led to their investigation as to how things like this can happen. And what they come up with is very disturbing. I've mentioned in other videos that I have a big problem with our CPS workers, and this is all across the country. And even in the county that I live in, they're just as bad as what you're getting ready to hear. And I'll cover that in another video in a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks. But anyway, the caseworkers that are involved in these cases just seem, they say that they care, but they don't act like they care. Because if you did, you would not repeatedly put kids back into bad situations. So without further ado, let's get into it so we can see what this is. Like I said, I've only seen about the first 15 seconds. So we're pretty much going to be going through this together.
CTM in Focus is the original reporting you'll see only on CBS this morning, exposing new information on issues that impact all of us. Today, we are focusing on the challenges facing Child Protective Services workers. 5-year-old AJ Friend was found dead in Illinois in April, and his parents were charged with murder.
Now, see, like I said, I come across this. This is actually, I was wrong. It wasn't about 15 seconds. It was maybe 25 seconds. But I saw this, and then what they say after this is what was really disturbing to me. For one, I covered this story in one of my videos, and it's a story that I continue to bring up because of what this kid went through and was repeatedly put back into that situation. And it literally took his death for CPS to realize there was a problem. And that in itself is a problem because they are Child Protective Services and they did not protect that kid. And there are a lot of other kids that are not being protected. And you're getting ready to find out just how many are losing their lives because of that.
Afterward, we started looking into how something like this could allegedly happen despite previous interventions by police and child welfare workers. We discovered hundreds of American children known to CPS agencies die of maltreatment every year.
That is why I have a problem with CPS. You heard that. Hundreds of kids die every year because CPS is not doing their job. And it is time that we start covering this stuff so that more kids do not have to suffer the same fate. And I'm going to cover in a video, a personal video in a few weeks that's going to explain why I have such a big issue with that, because I have seen that personally, and again I will get into that in that video. But let's continue, because this is as far as I've seen. I don't know what's going to be said after this. This is just as far as I've seen, but this is why what she said right there was why I wanted to cover this video. That's what I dedicate this channel to, is bringing awareness to the fact that CPS is not doing their job, and kids are suffering. Lots and lots of kids are suffering because of it.
CTM national correspondent Jerika Duncan set out to learn why. Jerika, what did you find out?
You know, this is why we do what we do as journalists, to really delve into important issues. We spent a day with a Child Protective Services caseworker in Outagamie County, Wisconsin. What we witnessed was disturbing, heartbreaking, and real. For the protection of the children, we agreed to hide the parents' identities. This is a story about the challenges facing the men and women tasked with ensuring the safety of children across this country.
Relapse is my biggest concern.
This woman is pregnant with her 5th child and admits using methamphetamines as recently as 2 weeks ago.
There's not much I can do.
It's Brittany Plowman's job to determine whether the kids living here are in danger.
I have some packets of information, one for...
Okay. So y'all caught that. She used, I'm not even going to repeat the name of the drug, but she used drugs 2 weeks ago while pregnant with her 5th child. The social worker's job is to determine if the kids are not safe there. So leave in the comments, what do you think about that? Like, do you think someone who is on that type of drug is going to be a good parent? Do you think kids are safe with somebody who is going to be actively using that kind of drug? Or drugs, period, but that one especially.
For each child.
As a caseworker for the Children, Youth, and Families Division in Outagamie County, Wisconsin, Plowman has already helped by putting 2 of the kids in daycare, where one just took her first steps.
She walked, and I didn't get to be there.
It's difficult that you got to miss out on that.
It is.
So this is a typical day for you.
Yeah, multiple of these back to back, but yeah.
Whew, that was pretty heavy.
Plowman handles new cases, typically working with about 15 families at once. She's one of 28 social workers in a county of more than 180,000 people.
There are things that you can't fathom, on a day-to-day basis. You can't fathom that a parent would do this to their child.
I pushed him into the wall.
Her goal is to keep families together, but she's had to separate about a dozen of them in the past 3 years.
Have you ever had doubts about whether or not you should have removed a child from their home?
Oh yeah, there's definitely doubt. Am I doing the right thing? Who's going to suffer from this the most?
That needs to be the number one question that they ask themselves before they put a kid back into a bad situation. And you notice, like, in the beginning of this video, the first thing that they mentioned was AJ Friend. And again, I've brought him up several times before and covered the story on that. So I'm well aware of what that kid went through. And if social workers actually had that mentality, if every social worker actually had that mentality, there would be less kids dying at the hands of their parents. So that's what needs to be considered. And the problem with it is there's a lot of counties, a lot of the country towns, a lot of counties that are still stuck in the mindset that a mother is best for the child. Even if the father is the better option, they're still stuck in that mindset. So they don't want to remove the child from the mother. So they will allow a mother to do horrible things. And you heard the one say she pushed the kid into the wall. And I was asked in a recent investigation, and again I'll get into that later on, but I was asked how I discipline my kid, and my response was, and a true response is, I don't. But I don't have to. I really don't. I have a good kid. He really, it's not that hard to redirect him. All I gotta say, no, you can't do that. No, sit down. That's the closest thing to a quote-unquote discipline that he gets when he's with me. That's not the case with the other side. Again, I'll get into that later. But mothers can do that stuff and get away with it. Fathers cannot do that. Like, so she'll say, well, if you're considering whether or not you're making the right choice on putting your kid back, then you really need to really think hard about that decision, because a bad decision means a kid is going to suffer. And as I mentioned in this news clip, hundreds of kids die every year because CPS does not remove the kids. You hear that? This lady said she second guesses whether or not she should have removed the child. Hundreds of kids die every year because CPS does not remove the child from a bad situation. That is why I do what I do. because I have come across so many stories that I have not covered, I'm going to cover in the future, but stories that I have not covered that were horrible, horrible situations for kids to be in. And nobody came to the rescue. And in the majority of the time, situations like that end in a fatality. That's not fair to the kids. And that's CPS's whole job. That's what they're designed to do, is to protect those kids. So why are hundreds of kids dying every year because CPS is not removing the child? Why is that happening if that's what they're paid to do? And they're paid by you. They're paid by taxpayers. So you should have a problem with that. If you're working, if you're paying taxes, you should have a problem with that, because your taxpayer dollars are going to are paying their salary, and they're not doing their job because there's so many kids dying because of them.
In 2017 alone, an estimated 1,720 children died from abuse and neglect in the U.S.
See that? That's a lot of kids. 1,720, and that's in 2017. And I covered in one video, and I'm saying this not assuming you saw it, but just saying, I did mention it in another video. The numbers have only gone up, because the latest one I saw was like 2019, and at that time it was like in like 1,840 deaths from the same issues. So the number is going up. And that's why I say, if you're a taxpayer and you're paying a CPS to protect these kids, and more kids are dying every year, you should have a problem with that. For one, I mean, you should have a problem with the fact that the kids are dying anyway, because that's not right. That's not fair to them, that they got to have their lives cut short because you don't want to do what is necessary. And I've seen this firsthand, how the CPS workers do not want to do what is necessary in order to protect the kids. And I've actually heard it said to me that it was I'm trying to think of how she worded it. She said it was unethical to remove the child from the mother. That's the way it was worded to me. Despite all of the evidence and everything else to back up the reasons as to why she should, but again, I'll get into that later. But the problem is they have all this evidence, they see the problems, and they refuse to address the problems. And a lot of the times, they seem to think they can correct the situation. They seem to think they can send these parents to these drug classes or parenting classes or whatever other classes, and because they get the certificate, CPS drops the case, thinking that these people learn their lesson. Then they get involved years later over the same issues, and they have to go all through the steps again. And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And in the end, it's not you suffering, it's not the parents suffering, it's the kids who are suffering. And because I actually asked a caseworker one time, I said, if it was your kid, would you want to put them back in that situation? And their answer to me was no. So I said, if you're not willing to put your kid in that situation, why are you forcing me to put my kid in that situation? I'm not going to get too far into that, but that's just how they think. That's what I mean. It's like, they see these situations. They wouldn't put their kid in that situation, but they have no problem forcing you to put your kid in that situation. And that, again, in itself is a big, big problem.
More than a quarter of those children were previously known to Child Protective Services agencies. The issue came to light earlier this year with the death of 5-year-old AJ Friend in Illinois.
Investigators located what they believe to be AJ's body buried in a shallow grave wrapped in plastic.
Police charged his parents with murder. Child welfare workers had been called to their home before.
Just to touch on that one real quick, they have been called there many times before. And there were reports by the cops in that town. There was reports by teachers in that town. There was reports by the doctors in that town. And even AJ Friend himself had told the social workers that his mom had caused those bruises. And they still did nothing about it. And the interesting thing about that is I was told, well, we can't do anything because the child can't tell me or can't tell us what is going on. The child can't tell us how he feels about these situations. And in that case, in the case of AJ Friend, he told them what happened and they still didn't listen. So that is just a BS excuse to do nothing. Because even if the child told you what happened, you're still not going to do anything. Because you didn't do anything when AJ Friend told you that his mom was beating the hell out of him. And you know what happened? And I don't know, like I said, we're going through this together. Like, I have not watched this other than the first 25 seconds, so I don't know if they mentioned this. But the way AJ Friend died, again, I covered the story about it. The way he died, like, he was beat throughout his life. He was 5 years old when he finally died. And the cause of death was he was beat to death with a shower head while being in a ice bath for, I think it was like 20 or 30 minutes. And then put to bed naked. And he never woke up. That's how he died. He was beat to death. Even though he told social workers that his mom was beating him. And because they said, well, we're going to put you back in their care, that's how he died. He ended up dying by being beat to death by his own mother. And the dad knew about it and tried to cover it up. The dad was the one who buried the body. And CPS could have done something to save that child and chose not to. And that's the way so many of these cases play out. They can do it. They have the ability. I've looked up the law in this state. They have the ability, if they feel that the child's safety is in danger, they have the ability to file it with the court and remove the child from the home permanently. But they chose not to because they thought they could fix the situation. And like I said, there were many investigations on that case alone. And it's the same way with all the other cases. There's usually multiple cases before something bad finally happens. So they had plenty of opportunity to remove the child from the home. They chose not to because they really thought they could fix the situation. And again, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And in the end, the kids are the ones that are paying the price.
Stories like that frustrate Maine State Senator Bill Diamond, who's been focused on this issue for nearly 2 decades.
We're not making progress.
The former teacher has introduced...
That's a fact. Not only are we not making progress, the problems are getting worse.
A bill pushing for a long-term commission to study the problems within his state's Child Protective Services Department.
Kids are being abused right now while you and I are talking. They're being abused terribly.
Think about that one. And that's actually a very, very, very good point, because even as you're watching this video, the same thing is true. There are kids that are being tormented. There are kids who are being tortured. There are kids who are being abused. There are kids who are being neglected. There are kids that are dealing with malnutrition. As you're watching this video, there are CPS workers involved in those investigations, and it's still going on. As you're watching this video, and if you take nothing from this video, then you gotta understand they're not going to do anything to correct the situation.
Only reason we don't know who they are is because they haven't died yet.
Experts say
that's a scary thought. Like I said, we're going through this together. That's a scary thought. And a lot of the times, that's what it takes for CPS to realize they messed up. He said the only reason that we don't know who these kids are is because they haven't died yet. CPS knows who they are because they're involved in multiple investigations. As I said, it's usually multiple investigations. They continue to put the kids back in bad situations, and that's how it ends. And you never hear about it until the kid dies. Like the AJ Friend case. He went through that for years. He went through that his entire life. You didn't hear about it until he died. You see what I mean? Even though CPS knew about it for years, you didn't know about it. Nobody knew about it until AJ actually died. You know what I mean? You see the problem with that? You see why we need to start holding CPS accountable? And I mean it when I say that. We really do. Because, like I said, I asked them, if it was your kid, would you put them in that situation? And their answer was no. So my question to them was, if you wouldn't put your kid in that situation, why are you making me put my kid in that situation? And there was no response to that because they couldn't. There was no logical response to that. That's why they didn't have an answer. You see what I mean? Like, if you think the situation is that safe, let them babysit your kids. See how you feel about that. And that's where the issue is. It's an easy choice to make when it's not your kids. But for the parents who are dealing with situations like that, especially if there's a separation involved, and one parent is a really bad parent, the other parent is a really good parent, and there's constant reports against the bad parent, and yet they keep putting the child back in with the bad parent. Like I said, it's an easy choice to make when it's not your kid. Yet the good parent who is trying to do what is best for the child is scared to death that his kid's going to end up dead. And your only response to that is, well, it's not my kid. Like, that's what it comes down to, is because it's not your kid. You know? And if you... So just, like, let me know in the comments what y'all think about that. Like, do y'all believe that's right? Do y'all believe that if a caseworker says that they would not put their kid in that situation, do you think it's right to force a parent to put their kid in that situation? Do you think that's right? Let me know in the comments what y'all think about that.
Caseworkers in many areas are underpaid and overworked. Reports of abuse have increased more than 12% since 2013, partly because of tougher laws requiring the reporting of suspected abuse, along with an increase in calls related to the opioid epidemic. This mother says her addiction began with a prescription for painkillers after oral surgery 15 years ago.
All right, one thing I want to touch on that. I mean, I'm not going to touch on too much of that right there because there's not really much I can say about that. I mean, for one, the laws are tougher as far as abuse because, and really it comes down to the bias. And I actually covered that in another video. Like, it really comes down to the bias of the social worker. Like, it depends on how they report it. So if they have that mindset that they don't want to take the child from this parent, they're going to report it even regardless of how bad that parent is, they're going to report it in a way that's not going to result in taking the child away. But if they have that mindset, they do want to take this child away from this parent, and usually when it comes to that, it's usually the men. So if they decide they don't want to take a child away from a mother, they're going to present the evidence in a way that would not result in taking the child from the mother. If they want to take a child from the father, they're going to present the evidence in a way that would result in taking the child from the father. So that in itself is a very shady situation. But the main thing I want to touch on was what they said about they are overworked and underpaid. And let me tell you, I've dealt with 5 different social workers. All right. All 5 of them drive better cars than I do. So don't give me that overworked and underpaid. All right. You clearly make more money than I do. because you're all driving better cars than I'm driving. All right, so don't give me that overworked and underpaid. And I actually mentioned this in another video. If you're in it for the money, you're in it for the wrong reason, because your job is to protect the kids. If your concern is how much you're getting paid to do that, that's a problem in itself. And we're the ones who are paying for it. So don't give me that overworked and underpaid shit. Because we're paying for you to protect the kids that you are not protecting. So, alright, so think about it. If you had a business, alright, if you was paying somebody to do a job and they did not do that job, would you continue to pay him or would you fire him? That's pretty much the way it works with CPS as it pertains to taxpayers. We're paying them to do their job and they're not doing their job. So why are we still paying them? Let me know in the comments what y'all think about that one. Please make that one make sense.
Oh. Like, I've never been homeless. I would hate to become homeless. But there are worse things. Not being with my children would be one of them things.
Have you ever had your children taken from you?
Yes.
Here in Outagamie County, the number of kids in foster care has doubled over the past 4 years. But Brittany Plowman says she believes the children in this household are safe for now, with their father.
And I actually asked this question because they brought this up, the fact that the woman had admitted to using drugs literally a couple of weeks before. This social worker's conclusion was that the kids are safe in that house, while this woman is using a very hard drug. Do y'all not see a problem with that? She believes the kids are safe in that house while this woman is using drugs. And she even admitted that her concern was that she would relapse. And she likely will, because it's common with people who use hard drugs like that. So let me know what y'all think about that one. Like I said, I mentioned something about that. So let me know what y'all think about that. Do y'all think a kid is safe in a situation like that?
Father at home, and with the additional assistance the county is providing.
Do you think this issue doesn't get enough attention?
More often than not, it's the bad stuff that surfaces and not the good. And I feel like that needs more attention because there's a lot of good that comes from child welfare.
I actually, honestly, completely disagree with that. She said it's only the bad stuff that surfaces and not the good. And the problem is by saying that, you're literally disregarding the bad stuff that happens. As if the bad stuff that happens is okay because you've got good stuff happening too. You see what I mean? Like, she's trying, like, the way it seems to me is she's trying to take the attention off of the bad stuff and put it on the good stuff. Yes, there are some cases that turn out good, where the parents do correct their situation, they do correct the problems, and they end up being good parents there on out. Most of the time, and I mean this when I say this, most of the time, more than 80% of the time, it ends badly. So you can't say only the bad stuff surfaces. And the reason only the bad stuff surfaces is because that stuff is the stuff y'all did nothing about. And because y'all didn't do anything about it, kids lost their lives. That's why that stuff surfaces more than the good stuff. And because the good stuff is a small percentage of their investigations. The bad stuff is a big percentage of their investigations. They do nothing about it. That's why it surfaces. Because they did nothing about it, even though there was multiple opportunities to remove the kids from that situation. They didn't do it. Because of that, the kid died. And she's trying to switch it's basically like a change of subject. Like, let's not worry about this bad stuff, even though that's a higher percentage. Let's worry about this small percentage of good changes that we make. Let's not worry about this big percentage of faults that we have that result in kids dying. Like, let's not worry about that. Let's not talk about that. Let's not bring that up. Let's talk about the good stuff. That's why people bring that up. All right? And that's the way caseworkers are, is they literally try to undermine the bad stuff and want to try to promote this good stuff. And again, we're the taxpayers. We're paying their salaries. And that's why they're promoting that. Is because they need us to continue to fund them. If they can't prove that they're doing any good, then we're not going to continue to fund them. If every case or the majority of the cases end up badly and they admit it, then we're going to stop funding them, and they know this. So that's why they try to play this whole, well, there's a lot of good stuff too. No, bullshit. Alright? I know that firsthand. Don't give me that. I've seen the way caseworkers work. That's not how they work. It usually does not end good for the kids.
It's not just about removals.
No, it's not just, I agree with that point right there. And I'm going to end it on this note. I agree with that point right there. It's not about removals. It's about the safety of the kids. And if that's what it takes to keep the kids safe, that's what you need to do. Because, as I mentioned before, I'm not advocating for putting kids into foster care, but there are other options you can go with. Surely there's another relative that would take the child that would not put a child in that bad situation. But you're not considering that. You think you can fix the situation, and you're never going to. The thing when it comes to adults, they're adults. They're set in their ways. They're never going to change who they are. That's the way they are. That's the way they're going to be. And the kids are surrounded by that. You thinking you can fix it only makes you, like I said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So everybody, I hope y'all enjoyed this video. Please let me know in the comments what y'all think about this story and the situations that were covered. And I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna post a personal one in a few weeks, and I'll get kind of more into that in that video. And anyway, so if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I will see y'all in the next one. Y'all have a good one.